Next round, we will go to Ms. Lantsman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Fox, for joining us. I wanted to get a little bit specific and dig in a little bit further into what my colleagues were asking, and it's about resourcing, and specifically, if you go on the TDSB website, there are numerous safety incidents that have been unaddressed by the Transport Ministry. And I'll speak about some specifics. On August 2019, there was a fatality at the CN McMillan rail yard, and Transport Canada hasn't, in what I've seen, scheduled a date to release the report for this death. So I want to know from you if you have any further information about when we can expect the information about this, and what's happening to prevent any further such death in the meantime.
With respect to the McMillan Yard occurrence, it's the Transportation Safety Board that's investigating it. We have completed the investigation. We are in the final stages of producing the report, and we will be releasing it imminently. I can't give you a specific date today, but that is definitely one of the ones, and I can tell you that it's done. It's just a question of we've got to do the final steps to put it out the door. I think it's important for the committee to know that TSB does not wait until we complete an investigation report and publish our report to provide safety feedback to Transport Canada and to the operator. We do that through other safety communications, things like rail safety advisory letters, rail safety information letters. And so they do receive information through the course of the investigation to help either the regulator or the operator take steps to reduce the risk of a similar reoccurrence, even before the investigation is completed.
And in your view, does that generally happen? Do you see this in this case that any changes had been made in this case specifically, given that we haven't seen an investigation or any kind of statement on it in 2 years?
I can assure the committee that safety action was taken from this and from this occurrence, and will be part of the final report, which we hope to release later in March or early April.
Sure. Ms. Fox, do you think you're well resourced enough to do these investigations in a timely manner?
Mr. Chair, we're resourced for a baseline of occurrences, but when we get either a very large investigation like a Lac Mégantic, or when we get a series of smaller investigations, it can stretch our resources. But we don't control, can't predict when these things are going to happen or how they're going to happen. And as I mentioned earlier, 2019, we had a number of investigations. We had something like half a dozen major rail investigations going on. So it does cause us to be stretched a little thin and take a little longer. But at the same time, each investigation is different, and we have to do a thorough job and get it right.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. I've got a question. Seeing as though I think the government, in my view at least, is dismantling the Canadian energy sector, there has been a downturn in railway incidents because of the lack of traffic. And I want to know if it's your view, given that oil is the most dangerous resources to transport. In 2021, Canada moved 1.6 million barrels of oil by rail. And I think that the Lac Mégantic disaster showed us that catastrophes can take place when moving oil by train. So do you think that transporting oil via pipelines will lead to greater rail safety or a decrease in these such incidents?
Mr. Chair, what I will say is we don't compare rail versus pipeline safety, other than to say that each mode of transport has its risks, and each mode of transport has to be conducted as safely as possible.
So in terms of, do you believe that rail transporting oil by rail is as safe as transporting it by pipeline, given that you don't make the comparison, but just on a number of incidents, if you're looking at it from a risk perspective?
Mr. Chair, there are different ways of comparing risk. When a unit train carrying crude oil derails, it depends on a lot of factors, how much oil is lost and where it's lost, and the impact on the environment and the possibility of casualties, versus, for example, a pipeline that can potentially leak more oil and create more environmental consequences. So it's really difficult to compare.
Are you, so Ms. Fox, I just want to make sure that if you are comparing them, sorry, I've lost my screen. If you are comparing them, you're comparing them from an environmental perspective to a loss of life perspective. My question is about safety and whether less oil transmitted by rail, in your view, would create better conditions for less incidents in terms of, let's say, the loss of life.
Mr. Chair, I think it would be difficult to say that because it's not what the train is carrying that causes the derailment. It's the track, it's the wheels, it's other factors. And so what we say is if you're going to carry oil or any other dangerous good by rail, then you need to take all the steps in terms of containment and other risk mitigation measures to reduce the risk of a derailment and then mitigate with the tank cars to mitigate the consequences of a derailment.
Mr. Chair, do I have
Thank you,
time for
Ms.
one more?
Lantsman.